Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada. So I'm happy to be back in our ongoing discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. We had a longish break, I think a little over a month and a half. Part of it because of my trip to India, and part of it because I had a cold when I came back. So So we will be resuming with our discussion in the second canto, second chapter. And quickly, we will go through a quick recap to just bring everybody else back to speed. So we had finished the discussion in the first canto, which was in the general category of setting the scene of the Srimad Bhagavatam to be spoken. And of course, it was more than that. The first canto is considered to be the foundation. So many of the essential tattvas were established. There, some of the important tattvas that were established were the position of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the uniqueness of Krishna compared to all other expansions and incarnations. In addition to that, especially in the first three chapters, the process of devotional service was described, and specifically in terms of Shravan Kirtan, in terms of hearing and chanting. In that context, the position of the Bhagavatam was established and glorified. The remaining part of the first canto after the first three chapters was an answer to the questions by the sages about the background of the Bhagavatam. How did it come to be spoken? Who was the speaker? Who was the audience? What was the circumstances in which it was spoken? So we see a description leading to the appearance of Maharaj Parikshit, beginning from Maharaj Yudhishthir. We see a description of the consciousness of Srila Vyasadeva to the point that it gets purified in being motivated by Narad Muni to write the Bhagavatam. Narad Muni gives his own example of how through the power of the association, he was able to transcend from being a Dasi Putra to a pure devotee of the Lord. And then we see the qualities of Maharaj Parikshit. How he was attacked within the womb by Ashwathama, how he was protected by Krishna, how he ruled, and the chastisement and protection by Parishad Maharaj of Kali. Then we also see the circumstances leading to the speaking of the Bhagavatam, the bewilderment of Parishad Maharaj, how he apparently insults a sage, Shamik Rishi, and how he is cursed by his son Shringi to die in 7 days, and how Maharaj Parishit takes it, accepts it as a benediction, gives up his kingdom, sits on the bank of the river. And then when the knowledge of the imminent death of Raj Rishi spread across the universe, many, many exalted sages and rishis assembled over there. Maharaj Parishit asks them 2 questions, for which he is not able to get a clear answer. That what is the duty of a person? And then what is the duty of a person who is about to die? So at that time, Sukadeva Goswami enters. And when Sukadeva Goswami enters, then everybody offers him a seat of respect. He naturally takes on the role as being the prime speaker of the various questions that will be put forward by Maharaj Parikshit. So Maharaj Parikshit once again puts forth these 2 questions, which essentially form the basis of the Bhagavatam to be spoken. So that brings us to the 19th chapter of the first canto, to the end of the first canto. The second canto, in the first chapter, so while Sukadeva Goswami, he succinctly answers the question of Maharaj Parikshit that in both cases, whether a person is about to die or the duty of a person, the duty is the same, which is to hear and glorify the name, the qualities and pastimes of Krishna. But then he begins to speak about the Virat Roop, or the form of the Lord that is perceived in material nature. So the first chapter of the second canto is essentially the description of the Virat Roop. In terms of the general flow, the first 3 chapters of the second canto is used by Maharaj Parikshit to establish the superiority of bhakti over all the other processes of self-realization. And not very different from what Sutta Goswami does in the first 3 chapters of the first canto when he is answering the questions of the sages of Naimisharanya. Then in chapters 4 to 7 of the second canto, Parishit Maharaj will ask 6 specific questions relating to the creation of the material universe. And Sukadeva Goswami will address this by relating a conversation between Lord Brahma and Narad Muni, when Narad Muni was asking the same questions of Lord Brahma. So these are essentially questions about Visarga, or secondary creation. And then finally, in the last 3 chapters, 8 to 10, Parishit Maharaj will ask more questions. Specifically, he will ask 21 more questions, and about various aspects of existence. And Sukadeva Goswami, in an answer to that, will quote a conversation between 2 great personalities. He will quote a conversation between Lord Brahma and Narad Muni, and a conversation between Maitreya Rishi and Mahatma Vidur. So the second conversation will continue in the third canto. So briefly, what we see is that Um, so now we have come to the second canto, second chapter, and we are resuming from verse 15. So we had done the first 14 verses. In the first 7 verse, Sukdev Goswami, he encourages Maharaj Parikshit to become fixed in meditating on the Virat Roop. So I'm sorry, he is going to encourage him to become fixed in serving the super soul or the Lord within the heart. The service on the Virat Roop was glorified in the first chapter. So here he is taking him to the next level, which is service to the Lord within the heart or the super soul. And Sukdev Goswami mentions that the ultimate goal of life is to serve the super soul, and one who does not should be considered to be a gross materialist. So in verses 8 to 14, there is a description of the super soul, that he possesses 4 hands. In the hands he carries a lotus, a wheel, the Sudarshan Chakra, the conch shell, and the club. Then he has beautiful lotus eyes. He wears yellowish garments and exquisite jewels. He wears a garland of fresh flowers. And his lotus feet are residing in the hearts of the mystics who are fixed upon him in meditation. So the purpose of this meditation is to assist in developing a service attitude to the Supreme Lord. So so that brings us to where we are right now, the 15th, from the 15th verse onwards, where Sukdev Goswami will start describing the process by which a yogi leaves the body while meditating on the super soul in the heart. So quick journey back from I guess from the first canto, just so that we are all kind of refreshed in terms of where we were in the Bhagavatam, and then we can start with a discussion on the on 2 to 15. I'll just pause for a few minutes over here and see if somebody has any questions regarding the continuity, regarding how did we arrive here, or any other questions, because like I said, we're meeting after a bit of a break. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Just want to tell you, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Prabhu. Glad to be back. Glad to see all of you.
Thank you.
Okay, so no further questions. We can resume our discussion from 2 to 15. Sthiram sukham charshanam astito yati yada jahasurimam mangalokam kale cha deshe cha manana sajayet prananyam gachen manasa jitashu. O king, whenever the yogi desires to leave this planet of human beings, he should not be perplexed about the proper time or place, but should comfortably sit without being disturbed, and regulating the live air should control the senses by the mind. So in the next 7 verses, which is from verse 15 to 21, Sukadeva Goswami will instruct that how a follower of the Astanga Yoga may leave his body to achieve the supreme destination. So commenting on this in Priti Sandarbha, Anuched 3, Jiva Goswami says that the verses from 15 to 21, they describe the immediate process of becoming liberated at the time of death, and that 22 to 31, they describe the gradual process. So the gradual process is known as Krama Mukti, where even though the person has attained the stage of being liberated, but yet wants to experience the different creations of the Lord. So instead of going straight away back to the spiritual world, such a devotee will go to different planetary systems. And Krama means in sequence, that he will ascend to higher and higher planetary system until he reaches the highest, the topmost planet of Lord Brahma, and then from there he goes back to the spiritual world. So the first 7 verses, they actually talk about the immediate process, where the devotee has no interest anymore in the material world, and he immediately returns back to the spiritual world. And the rest of the verses till the end of the chapter, the 10 verses from 22 to 31, they talk about Krama Mukti, or the gradual process. So this particular verse is describing the process of the perfection attained as a result of Yoga Mishra Bhakti. So when such a person has a desire to give up his body, he is relying on the purity of the process. That's the nature of bhakti. It's not dependent on anything else. So otherwise, the whole process of Astanga Yoga is to control the life airs so that one gives up one's life at an auspicious time. So just what would it be, like maybe 2 weeks ago, there was we celebrated Makar Sankranti. So Makar Sankranti is when the sun, it enters into the northern part of the hemisphere. So this is the time that is aspired by the yogis to leave the body, because this is the auspicious time. Makar Sankranti is the time when either 14th or 15th of January. So Makar Sankranti is the time when Bhishma Dev gave up his body, even though he was not particularly dependent on this, but because he had this benediction of being able to give up his body when he desires, he chose a time that was auspicious. In the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it's more elaborately described that those who are following Karma Mishra Bhakti or Gyan Mishra Bhakti, they will try and give up their body at an auspicious time. So in the 8th chapter, we also see that Krishna, he says that ultimately, if a yogi is able to focus on Krishna, then this time and place of birth does not really matter. So such a yogi that is being described by Sukadeva Goswami here, a Yoga Mishra Bhakta, he does not really rely on karma or gyan because he has already perfected these processes. So Sukadeva Goswami, he starts off by saying sthirham, and sthirham means steady, and he says mana na sajayet, in a mind that is not disturbed. Then he says pranan niyachet. So pran means the life airs, and also means that the flow of the senses. The pranan niyachet means that one whose senses are completely controlled by the mind. So all these are symptoms of one who have already perfected the process of karma and gyan. So through karma and gyan, through karma one gets elevated to the mode of goodness, and through gyan one gets on the platform of complete sense control, prana niyachat, and one is no longer disturbed by the lower modes, manana sajayet. So Sukadeva Goswami is speaking this verse to encourage Parikshit Maharaj about the superiority of yoga over karma or gyan. And then by ultimately showing that, so it's a case of transitive superiority. So having established the superiority of yoga over karma or gyan, then Sukadeva Goswami will demonstrate that the higher results of the yoga are dependent on the presence of bhakti. So it automatically establishes bhakti at an exalted position. Okay, next verse. Manasva buddhya malaya. I'm sorry, different meter. Manasva buddhya malaya niyamya kshetragya etam ninaye tamatmani atmanam atmanya avaruddhya dhiro labho pashantir virameta kritya. Thereafter, the yogi should merge his mind by his unalloyed intelligence into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the super self. And by doing this, the fully satisfied living entity, being situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, becomes situated in the supreme stage of satisfaction, so that he ceases from all other activities. So now Sukadeva Goswami is explaining how this contemplative yogi has his intelligence fixed. So the question that was asked was, what is the duty of a man who is about to die? The answer that is given in this verse is that the duty of a man who is about to die is to achieve perfection. And Sukadeva Goswami will explain, according to this process, how to achieve perfection. So what happens at the time of death for such a yogi who is meditating on the super soul? So what Sukadeva Goswami is demonstrating that, and this comes more implicitly rather than explicitly, that even though the practices are different between a bhakta and a yogi, the stages that one goes through are very similar. So the first thing in Astanga Yoga is niyam, following rules and regulations that help to regulate the mind. And how does one regulate the mind? By amalya eva buddhi. So amalya means uncontaminated intelligence. Only eva means only by uncontaminated intelligence. So through the yoga process, one gets this purification. And pure intelligence, this amalya eva bhakti, means to understand, not to be agitated by the material world. So this is exactly the same as the purification that one goes through in the process of bhakti. So can anyone name the stage? What is the stage when one is going through bhakti? Amalya eva buddhi. So amalya eva buddhi is that by the strength of one's intelligence, one is no longer agitated by the material world. And we have a similar stage when we go through the angas of bhakti, the stages of bhakti, sorry, which is
Vyavasayatmika buddhi.
close,
Nishta.
closer, which is anartha nivritti. So amalya is being purified. So you remember we discussed how mal means like dirtiness. So the dirtiness, the mal is also anarthas. So amalya eva buddhi is basically intelligence that is uncontaminated. And similar in bhakti, we go to anartha nivritti. And anartha nivritti, as Saranga Prabhu was indicating, that then leads us to nishtha, when the bhakti is no longer fickle. The previous verse was talking about the yogi giving up his body without really waiting for material auspiciousness, but under a condition of spiritual auspiciousness. So what is the result of that? The verse is talking about the result. So what does the verse says? That should merge his mind into the living entity, and then merge the living entity into the super self, and thus becomes situated in a stage of satisfaction. So important to note over here is that the merging over here is essentially what is described in the Ishopanishad as ekatvam. So ekatvam means that similarities in purpose. That when the living entity understands that the perfection of his existence is in aligning the purpose of his existence with that of Krishna. So when the merging of this purpose happens, when the jiva understands that its eternal duty is to serve Krishna, so that is ekatvam, as described in Ishopanishad, and this is what is being described over here. So Jiva Goswami says that for a reader to try and make a point that the merging that is being described over here is the merging as is described by the impersonalists, does not make sense, because after speaking so many verses on the eternal distinction between Jiva and Krishna, Srila Vyasadeva or Sukadeva Goswami will not recommend the physical merging of the living entity in the super self. So the distinction between a conditioned mind, intelligence, and Jiva from Krishna arises when the purposes are disparate. And this is essentially the basis of the creation of the whole material world. When the Jiva thinks that his purpose is to enjoy independently of Krishna, the material world comes into existence. And when the purposes merge, when the Jiva understands that its purpose is to serve Krishna, then from that point, for that Jiva, the material world stops to exist. So Jiva Goswami mentions that this distinction of purposes arises when the intelligence is contaminated with lust. When the Jiva considers himself to be the doer and the enjoyer, he separates from the Lord. And the yogi, through the process of meditation, is able to align himself to the purposes of the Lord. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he says that when the living entity is directly seen by the Lord dictates to him to act according to his desire. And when the living entity follows him perfectly, the living entity ceases to discharge any other duty for his illusory satisfaction. In his pure unalloyed state, the living being attains the stage of full bliss, labdho pashanti, and ceases all material hankering. So if you look at the verse, the word labdho pashanta means one who has attained full bliss, which is the original position of the soul. Okay, so we'll do one more verse, and then after that we'll take a break for any Q&A. Nayatra kalo anisham paraprabhu kuto nudeva jagatam yaishare nayatra sattvam narajas tamascha navai vikaro namahan pradhanam. In that transcendental state of labdhopashanti, there is no supremacy of devastating time, which controls even the celestial demigods who are empowered to rule over mundane creatures. And what to speak of the demigods themselves. Nor is there the mode of material goodness, nor passion, nor ignorance, nor even the false ego, nor the material causal ocean, nor the material nature. So the goal that has been described of the yogi who is meditating on the super soul is to develop this mood of service. And in a perfection, the effect of time ceases. So effect of time is, so the nature of time is to destroy. So essentially it means that such a person is not subject to devastation. And Srila Prabhupada, he translates Kala. Kala literally means time, but uh, uh, based on the context, Srila Prabhupada translates it to destructive time, because that is the effect of time. So time is also there for devotees, but it is constructive time, because it gives the devotees more and more opportunities to serve Krishna. So for the devotees, as the time goes on, they are in a day, you see, and this is again from a more exalted platform. In the Ashtakali Leela, we see that how the devotees take advantage of the various pastimes in the different parts of the day to serve Krishna. And then overall for the devotees, time is nourishing their devotion. So the effect of time is exactly the opposite. Sometimes when devotees glorify other devotees, they glorify it in this respect, that the person has been practicing Krishna consciousness for the last 10 years, or the person has been serving his Guru Maharaj for the last 5 years, etc. So they talk about time in a way that reflects this quality of nourishment, which is opposite to its quality in the material world, where when somebody says that I am 70 years old, then essentially the person is saying that I have at the most 30 more years to live. 70 years of my life have gone, so I have 3/4 of my life has been destroyed. So that is the destructive effect of time. Kal also refers to the fact that the Paramatma is witnessing the actions and moving matters accordingly. So just a more philosophical way to talk about the effects of time. So this is described by it's actually described in one of the Sandarbhas. Jiva Goswami, he actually translates Kal to astrology, and he says that how astrology is all about the movement of the planets on the scale of time, by which one is served the results of their own previous activities. So in the material context, Kal is also a way, is used as a platform for karma. That one's previous activities, the results are served on the scale of time. And how this happens is through the influence of the super soul. So two ways. One is that the super soul has been witnessing the prior activities, and then based on what it has witnessed, it has accordingly moved matter in a way to serve the results of those activities in the future time. The point over here is made is that because in this state of Labdhopashanti, the influence of Kal weakens to the point that it is gone, is the reason why the devotees are not under the influence of the charts. They're not under the influence of the movement of the planets. So that's the connection that Jiva Goswami actually makes. It's a little derived, but then he concludes that devotees, the reading, because Jiva Goswami himself was an expert in astrology, But the point that he's making is that for devotees, astrology is useless because of Labdopashakti. That the influence of time is gone, and essentially astrology is talking about the influence of time. So even the most expert astrologers are unable to predict the future of devotees. So this is a point that Srila Prabhupada would also make. Like sometimes he would say more poetically that when you clap, like when you're doing kirtan and clapping, then he says the lines in your hands are changing. And of course, they don't actually change, but the point that he made was that the lines on the hand is also one form of astrology, wherein people study it to predict the future, but by clapping it, they change. So Krishna takes over one's future. Prabhupada in the purport, he mentions that in the Bhagavad Gita, 3 principal subjects have been explained by Lord Krishna, namely Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. But one can reach the Vaikuntha planets by the practice of Bhakti Yoga only. The other 2 are incompetent in helping one to reach the Vaikuntha Lokas, although they can, however, conveniently take one to the effulgent Brahmajyoti as described above. So this was verse 17. Before I start with verse 18, I'll just pause and see if there's any comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Earlier, it was mentioned that like Karma Yoga brings one to mode of goodness, but Karma Yoga also helps one to leave the material world and reach Brahmajyoti, Prabhuji, because even with the Nishkama Karma, without Bhakti, if one does, like right now he may not be incurring new karma, be it positive or negative, but whatever he incurred, that will be there. Like so, what will be the final destinations? Like karma and jnana, like how they will reach Brahmajyoti?
So a lot depends on what does the person do after having reached a certain stage of purification. So typically speaking, when the word yoga is used, then the understanding is that there is bhakti over there. Now, how that person reaches that stage of bhakti? How does the person become qualified to execute that bhakti? So one can become qualified by initially following through the process of karma, which is acting according, which is basically piety, which is getting elevated to the mode of goodness. And then from that platform, one can take to bhakti. So that the verse, what's the verse that describes karma yoga? I'm forgetting the Sanskrit. The English is like, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you think, you offer it to Krishna.
Yat karoshi yadashnasi.
Yes. Yat karoshi yadashnasi, yajoshi dadashi. Tat. So that's a description of the transition from karm kand to karm yoga. Right. So karm kand is, as you were mentioning, trying to initially sakam and then nishkam. Sakam will get you to the higher planets. Nishkam, if it is Jnanashrat, will get you to the Brahmajyoti. But then if one gets the association of a devotee, then it becomes Yad Karoshi Yadasnashi Yadjoshi Dadashita, and then it becomes Bhakti Yoga. So that would get described as Karma Mishrit Bhakti. What Sukadeva Goswami is talking over here is Yoga Mishrit Bhakti. So remember that in order to achieve the stage of Astanga Yoga, one should have reached the mode of goodness through the process of karma. One should have developed complete control on the mind and senses through the process of Gyan, and then achieve control on one's self and meditated on the super self. But then the same injunction also applies to Astanga Yoga. That when Astanga Yoga is mixed with bhakti, then one is able to elevate oneself to the Vaikuntha planets. Otherwise, one may go to whatever the yogi desires. They may go to Brahmalok, they may go to Siddhalok, they may stay in the current lok and acquire more mystic powers there. So when these terms are used, they actually are so my realization has been that one should not use these terms as cookie cutters, right? One should not think of these terms as Karma Yoga, there's a fixed starting point and a fixed ending point. And because one, through the execution of karma, one can go all the way to the spiritual world, right? We are examples of that. At least that's what we are aspiring to be, right? We are following Devi Varnashram, which means that we follow the Varnas and the ashrams. We do our jobs, we have a family, but we are aspiring to go back, not even to the Vaikuntha planets, we're aspiring to go back to Krishna Loka, right? So we, so rather than thinking of it as something with a fixed process with a big started and an ending point, it's in the context, it's important for us to think that these how are these basically aligning to the conception of the devotee. That when Sukadeva Goswami is talking about yoga over here, he's talking about a yogi who is aspiring to become a devotee, and then the whole process acquires a different description. Otherwise, you would see different purports from Srila Prabhupada, right? If you read chapter 6, where Krishna is describing more of the Astanga Yogi, the purports of Srila Prabhupada are a little different over there. He keeps mentioning the impracticality of the process. Arjun also complains about it. We don't see that much over here because right from the beginning, Sukadeva Goswami is blending bhakti into the process.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Okay.
I have one question. Can I go ahead?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. In text number 16, the stage of Labhupasanti is explained in 3 stages. Merging one's mind into intelligence, then the intelligence into jiva, and jiva into the super soul. And then in text 17, it is described that in the stage of Labhupasanti, there's no influence of time, no modes of nature acts on the individual. There's no false ego, and there is no material nature. I'm just wondering if I see Prabhupada in the translation of the text, he used that Sanskrit word Labhupasanti. Is there an English equivalent or like a little phrase in English that we can kind of summarize that? Or is there a stage that we know of in bhakti that could explain that stage? I mean, putting everything together.
It's a good question, Prabhu. So what I understood when this stage of Labdhu-Pashanti was introduced and described in these two verses, it reflects to the stage of spiritual liberation. Like if you see the word to word in 16, Labdhu-Pashanta is one who has attained full bliss, Anandmai, which is basically a stage of spiritual liberation. Now, having said that, this is the first time that I encountered this term. And I don't remember it being used later on. So I think your question was that does this define a state that is that is commonly referred to on at later parts of the Bhagavatam or in spiritual advancement? I don't see the term used much. I mean, I didn't do any research, but I don't remember seeing the term used. So my sense is that in these two verses, it is basically used to describe the stage of one reaching spiritual perfection.
Can we say bhava, or can we say rati, or I'm just trying to.
The stage of it is so like when we talk about Satchit Anand, it is a state of Anand, because if you look at the symptoms of Labdhu-Pashanti, it is a stage when the inflow symptoms nature, and it is not even so the last where it says pradhanam. So the pradhanam, as you know, is the sum total of the material existence. The very first the very first creation in the material world is pradhan. So these different stages are the more when the material world is first created, it is created as pradhan, and then the pradhan, it then basically splits. It splits into the tattvas, and the tattvas then contain the modes of material natures, the goodness, passions, and ignorance, and they are then manifested as the various living entities, demigods or humans or demons. So essentially what the verse is saying is that the entire span of the material creation, all the way to the material creation in its most subtle form, which is the pradhan, ceases to exist. Because technically speaking, so if we were to only look at the cessation of time, pradhan does not contain time in it. It's the only aspect of material creation where time does not exist. So a person who's reading this might say that, does the yogi enter into the pradhan? And Sukdev Goswami is saying, no, not even the pradhan. That don't be misguided by this cessation of the influence of time. He even transcends pradhan. So he's just being very specific in saying that he transcends the whole realm of material existence and enters into the spiritual existence. So that is Labdhu-Pashanti, that the person is now reinstated in his spiritual position with respect to Krishna.
And that is, that stage could be attained even while one is in the material body, in the material world.
Yes, I believe in one of these later verses, Srila Prabhupada makes this point that when that ekatvam is attained, when one gets completely aligned in purpose to Krishna, then at that time, this all these influences that are described in this verse cease. So one may be in the material world, but not subject to the destructive effect of time. One may be in the modes of material nature, but not under the modes of material nature. So typically defined as the position of pure devotees who either through sadhana or through siddha. So devotees like Srila Prabhupada, who were never under the influence of the modes, but they come for the sake of service, or devotees were fortunate enough that through the process of sadhana, they're able to perfect, and they're no longer in the material world, but they continue to be in the material world in order to serve Guru and Krishna. So in those situations, yes, the externals may indicate, but the internals are different.
Can the verse, that verse, Iha Yasya Haridasya Karmanam Manasagira Nikalasha Avastatu Jivan Mukta Sauchate, some verse to that effect, does that bring out the concept?
So I'm not familiar with that verse, Prabhu. Difficult for me to comment on it.
Okay, thank you. It's you explained it nicely.
Okay.
I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Okay, so if there are no more questions, we'll continue with the 18th verse. Param padam Vaishnavam Amanantita Yane Tinetitya Atad Utishkrashva Visirjya Doratmayam Ananya Sahodra Hirdo Paguyaraha Padam Pade Pade. The transcendentalists desire to avoid everything godless, for they know that supreme situation in which everything is related with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore, a pure devotee who is in absolute harmony with the Lord does not create perplexities, but worships the lotus feet of the Lord at every moment, taking them into his heart. So this is describing the mood of the person who has been described in the previous two verses. That how does he conduct himself? So very similar verse is spoken by Krishna in the 6th chapter, where he says that a true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees everything in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. So this is the mood of a this is called samadrishti, where a person sees everything as the same. And the reason that they see everything as the same is because they see everything in relationship to the super soul. So because of their acknowledging the presence of super soul everywhere, They desire the welfare of everyone. And they will never desire to put anyone in distress. And the meditation on Krishna is constant. So as per Srila Prabhupada, this verse points to the yogi who when making advancements, he has now transcended to the personal form of Krishna. So when the verse says that such a person does not have perplexities, so Doratmyam, so Prabhupada says that the Doratmyam actually refers to the confusion that arises from making a distinction between the personal and an impersonal form of Krishna. So in the purport, Prabhupada says that a pure devotee of the Lord no longer wastes valuable time in discriminating the Brahman from non-Brahman, Brahman from non-Brahman, because he knows perfectly well that the Lord Parabrahman, by his Brahman energy, is interwoven in everything. And thus everything is looked upon by a devotee as the property of the Lord. So this is not a new concept for us. Like I said, we discussed this, or maybe not you and I specifically, but in the Bhakti Shastri or reading of the Bhagavad Gita, this was discussed in the 6th chapter, where one acquires Samadrishti because of seeing the presence of Krishna in the form of Super Soul everywhere and in everything. And Prabhupada extends this saying that he does not waste time trying to make this distinction between the personal and the impersonal, the Brahman and the non-Brahman form. So the pure devotees of the Lord who are in harmony with the Lord, they allow themselves to be directed by the Lord. And they do not create perplexities. So perplexities over here has different levels of understanding. At a very basic level, perplexity is through the modes, right? That if you're envious of somebody, then you create perplexities for the person. Maybe you harm the person. Maybe you insult the person. So that is one level of perplexities. This verse is actually talking at a certain higher level, where the perplexities are created by one's misunderstanding of the relationship with Krishna. So such devotees, because they have understood and they have established their position with respect to Krishna, because they're acting as per that position, they do not create any perplexities by giving mixed signals to others. They do not create any confusions by following speculative theories or by expressing desires to merge with the Lord. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that perplexities also means to think that the God has a material body or to think that we are God. The devotees don't do anything that will take away from Krishna's service because they get so much pleasure from the service. That is why they're looking to become one with Krishna in desire. This is the supreme stage of satisfaction. So this verse, it also means that the aspiring devotee will act as per adhikar. So this is another explanation of the perplexities that the devotees act in a way that is commensurate to the level of advancements. So there are different levels of meditation based on one's own purification and detachment. If one tries a higher level of meditation before they are sufficiently detached, then the results will be causing perplexities. Right? So this is an example of Phalgu Vairagya, where somebody has given up their family life, has given up the external attachment to the family, but then other people's, so they say that, okay, this person has developed a fair amount of renunciation, but then they see the person is taking intoxicants. So it's a perplexing situation, that how can a person renounce the family and take intoxicants? This is, of course, an extreme example. Even at a subtle level, somebody is, sometimes we see that in devotees also, that they become very, very strict and they start judging other people. What time do you get up in the morning? And what all services are you doing? Have you done this? Have you done that, etc.? And it just creates perplexities among, because that's not why one makes devotional advancements, right? One does not, if one has elevated oneself to a higher stage of sadhana, then it's because they have developed a taste for it. It's not for the purpose of judging others. That I can't imagine chanting my rounds after 6 a.m. in the morning. How are you able to chant rounds after 6 o'clock? And so they're just creating perplexity. So it's an example of one who is violating one's adhikar. So such a person will only cause perplexity for himself, because he's acting at a level that he has not attained, and for others who will not be able to reconcile his external and internal. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, 28th chapter, in verses 38 to 44, Krishna actually talks about this situation, that a yogi, what a yogi should do should he become perplexed. And I have, okay. Thank you, Paramatma Prabhu. I thought it was a question. So, so that is another understanding of this verse, that when a yogi, so back to the flow that Sukadeva Goswami is taking Parishad Maharaj through, that he's talking about the stages of his advancements of an Astanga yogi. And here he's talking about a yogi who has now transcended from the impersonal to the personal form of Krishna. And Prabhupada says not just the personal, because the Paramatma is also personal, but actually to the singular personal form of Krishna. And having transcended to that state, is no longer perplexed himself, or is creating perplexities for those around him. Okay, we'll do the next verse, verse 19. Itham munestu pramed vyavasthito Vijnana drakvirya suranditashaya Swaparshnenan Saparshnenavidya Udam tato nilam Thaneshu satsunamaye jujita klama. By the strength of scientific knowledge, one should be well situated in absolute realization and thus be able to extinguish all material desires. One should give up the material body by blocking the air hole through which stool is evacuated with the heel of one's foot and by lifting the life air from one place to another in 6 primary places. So the verse starts with Itham Munish. So Itham means thus. And Srila Prabhupada establishes the context over here. If you look at the word to word, he says thus by Brahman realization. So Itham means that thus being situated in the Brahman, and Ithas Munish. So Munish is the person, the practitioner. Muni is the one who is man, who is in this business of working on the mind. Then he says tu. So tu is but, and typically speaking, the word tu, it indicates a departure from the flow of logic. So it's like you're saying that I like your work, well articulated, neatly written, but, right? And you say that but, and now the other person knows that you're going to speak something different. So different, or the other way around also. So you can say that, you might say that your work needs improvement, and there is a confusion in the thought, but, and then the person thinks that, okay, there is something of value. So here we see that it says that Itham Munish tu. So tu means that there is an imminent departure in the ongoing line of logic. So here the word tu is put in to indicate that such a yogi has to make great endeavor compared to what will be revealed later on. So by Gyan, which is a prerequisite to Astang, one controls the senses. By the practice of yoga, one is able to control one's desires. So one through, so this is known as Vigyan Drag. So Vigyan Drag is realized knowledge. And through realized knowledge, one is able to destroy one's subtle desires. And the rest of the verse is explaining the process of voluntarily giving up the body. So this process is very similar to the process that is explained by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita chapter 8 in verses 12 and 13. So once again, this verse is indicating that one who is following the process of so think of it this way, that somebody is saying that he's a very smart boy, but he's naughty. So this is the but he's naughty part of it, because the context that has been established in the previous verses is that of bhakti on the platform of yoga. But a person who does not follow the process of bhakti will follow this process of, so this is technically known as Sad Chakra. So this is the process by which one raises one's life airs through the 7 chakras and the 6 circles of air. So again, similar to described in the 8th chapter, the 7 chakras, which is beginning from the Muladhara chakra, which is at the base, and then all the way to the crown of the head, which is the Brahma chakra. So Brahma chakra is generally considered to be beyond one's control. So such chakra is controlling the chakras, but really speaking of the 7 chakras, only the 6 chakras are controlled. The 7th chakra is, I guess, the culmination of the control of the lower 6 chakras. So this process of Astanga is more or less a physical attempt for spiritual perfection, right? So Krishna says that at the time of dying, if you think of me, you will come back to me. 2 ways of doing it. One way is that develop so much love for Krishna that you cannot help but think about Krishna all the time, whether you're living or dying. That's the path of a devotee. What is the other process? That you control your time of death and purposefully think of Krishna at the time of death and then achieve a similar result. So it's a more mechanistic process. So not possible in the age of Kali. So what is recommended in the age of Kali? Burijan Prabhu, he writes that chanting the holy name is more effective for concentration of mind in this age. In Kali Yuga, no one can practice this Vigyan. Even the prerequisites are impossible. In Patanjali Sutras that are briefly explained in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, they are given as Yam Niyam, which include cleanliness, non-violence, truthfulness, no stealing, brahmacharya, freedom from greed. If one is truthful, all his words prove true. If one is non-violent, no one is an aggressor. If one is free from greed, one knows past, present, and future. These are impossible to practice in the current age of Kali. If by some miracle one is able to practice, then there is the allure of mystic siddhis. The practicing yogi can be enamored by them and miss the real perfection. So Sukadeva Goswami is putting this over here for the sake of completeness. But he's also indicating by the use of the word tu, that it's in age of Kali difficult to do that, and that's what Burijan Prabhu is talking more about. So if you are to read, or if you're interested in reading more about Krishna's description of the Yoga Siddhis, then read the 11th canto, 15th chapter, where these 18 mystic perfections are described, of which the Ashta Siddhis, they are the primary, and the 10 are called the subpotencies, or they are the secondary ones. And towards the end of the chapter, Krishna says that, and this is in verse 34, whatever mystic perfections can be achieved by good words, herbs, austerities, and mantras can all be achieved by devotional service to me. Indeed, one cannot achieve the actual perfection of yoga by any other means. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he says that, but in modern days, when the influence of Kali Age is so, Kali Yuga of Kali age is so disturbing, practically everyone is untrained in the art of bodily exercise. Concentration of mind is more easily attained in these days by the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. The results are more effective than those derived from the inner exercise of life air. So it's interesting, Srila Prabhupada, if you read the purport of this particular section, then without saying that, Srila Prabhupada is talking about the various stages of yoga. So he first talks about the bodily exercise, right? So these are the earlier stages of yoga where there are asanas that is described, and then there is the inner exercise of the life air. So these are the stages of pranayama. And then he talks about the concentration of the mind. So these are the later stages of dhyan and samadhi. So the basic point Prabhupada makes in the purport is that any of the stages of the yoga are difficult to attain in this particular age of Kali. Okay, we'll do one more verse, and after that we'll stop. So verse 20. Nabhyam sthitam hridayadhiropyatasmad udanagathyurasi tam nayena munihi tato anusandhaya dhiya manasvi svatadumulam shanake nayeta. The meditative devotee should slowly push up the life air from navel to the heart, from there to the chest, from there to the root of the palate. He should search out the proper places with intelligence. So this is Sukadeva Goswami continuing to describe the process of Shat Chakra. Prabhupada mentions in the purport, there are 6 circles of the movement of the life air, and the intelligent bhakti yogi should search out these places with intelligence and in a meditative mood. Among these mentioned above is the Swadhisthana Chakra, or the powerhouse of the life air. And above this, just below the abdomen and the navel, is the Manipura Chakra. When upper space is further searched out in the heart, one reaches the Anahat Chakra, and further up, when life air is placed at the root of the palate, one reaches the Vishuddhi Chakra. So Srila Prabhupada is essentially describing the ascensions of the chakra. So just for the sake of completeness, the 7 chakras at the base of the spine is the Mooladhara Chakra. Then the Swadhisthana Chakra is the one that is below the navel. Then the Nabhi Manipur Chakra is at the navel. This is, at least in material, this is one of the most powerful chakras, the Nabhi Manipur Chakra, which controls a lot of health. So when you go for treatment for health, especially go to the yogic process of treatment, then they manipulate the Nabhi Manipur Chakra. One of the and what we see is, of course, a lot of vestiges, like, remnants of yoga. But one of the things that they say is that if you're feeling uneasy, bad health, then you should cup your hand like this and put it in this area right under your rib cage, above your navel. There is this area which is the area where the Nabhi Manipur Chakra is there. So you can put it over there, because this chakra actually supports the digestion, the flow of the vitality in the body. Then above the Nabhi Manipur Chakra is the Anahata Chakra. and this is in the region of the heart. Above that is the Vishuddhi Chakra, which is in the region of the chest. Then there is the Agya Chakra, which is called the third eye, and this is between the eyes in the forehead. And the highest is the one that is called the Brahma Randhra, or the Sahasra Chakra, which is the crown of the head. So Sukadeva Goswami here is talking about the process of pushing up one's life air all the way till between the eyebrows, the Agya Chakra there. So another word to note in this verse is that Sukadeva Goswami, he says Shankayar, and Shankayar means gradually. So gradually indicates that this process of elevating one's life air from the lower chakras to the higher, it happens slowly, and it takes a long period of time. So which is why the importance of being very patient is stressed in the life of an Astanga yogi. In fact, the initial stages of Astanga yoga are there to develop this patience. They have nothing directly to do with transcendental advancements. They're more to be prepared to wait for a long time, extend one's lifetime, extend the ability to meditate, because the process is slow. Another thing you'll notice in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that there are 6 circles of the movement of the life air, and the intelligent bhakti yogi should search out these places. So Prabhupada is referring to an Astanga yogi as a bhakti yoga. So the process that is being described is that of Astanga yoga, which is something that a devotee typically does not engage in. However, in the context of this description, Sukadeva Goswami is talking about an Astanga yogi who is beginning to appreciate the potencies of Krishna. So these are the Astanga yogis who are, so to speaking, are getting contaminated by bhakti. They are now able to make that distinction between Parabrahman and Bhagwan. So that is why Srila Prabhupada, he uses the terms interchangeably. That he calls them bhakti yoga because they have already embarked on the process of devotional service. Okay, so I'll stop over here. We are actually out of time, but if there's any questions or comments, we can spend a few minutes.
So Prabhuji, so as one elevates in the Shat Chakra process, he elevates himself to the upper chakras, gradually he will be purified to get bhakti, Prabhuji?
Not really. I think the elevation in the chakras is basically a recommended mechanism in Astanga yoga, that you're elevating your life airs, and ultimately you can elevate it to the point where you go to one of the higher planets. But in this particular context, that is why Srila Prabhupada is saying, in this particular context, Sukadeva Goswami, he is bringing forth that kind of Astanga yogi who is transitioning over to devotion. So not really because of the elevation of the chakras, but if you see the flow in the chapter, he begins with one who is meditating on the Virat Purush, and then he ends by talking about a Virat by a person who's meditating on the impersonal form and transitioning over to one who is meditating on the super soul. And then while he's describing the advancements of the one who is in this mode, he then begins to talk about one who is meditating on personal form of Krishna, right? So he is not talking about the stages in isolation. He's talking about the progress of, like if you read Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita, then you'll get a clear understanding. The mood of Gopakumar is very similar to the mood that is described in this verse. That while he's meditating on the impersonal, he develops attachment for the super soul. While meditating on the super soul, he develops attachment for the Lord. It's a case of one who is undertaking Krama Mukti. So even though he becomes pure devotee, but he does not want to leave the material world. So that's why he becomes Indra, he becomes Brahma, he goes to Vaikuntha, and then he goes there. So in this context, it is the transition of the mood, not necessarily the transition of the chakras. Okay.
Hare Krishna, just one comment. We have seen that Prabhupada has not emphasized too much on asanas or even on taking care of our health in a way. Like other society, they will say, you have to take care of your health. Okay, Prabhupada does not really stress too much. We talk about prasad and chanting mostly compared to asanas and watching what you eat.
True. Of course, I think Prabhupada took a lot of care of his health, but I think the point that you're making is that not for the sake of taking, or not for sake of taking care of health. Like many times these asanas, they are specifically directed towards longevity or good health, and Prabhupada definitely deprecated that. Taking care of the body so that you can use your body in the service of Vaishnavas and Guru. We see in Prabhupada's own life, like, he took good care of his body. He was regulated, and he would take
Morning walk.
walks. He would take morning walks and a massage. He would have a daily massage there. But again, his mood was not so much. When he got his third heart attack, then the prayer that he asked his disciples to do was that to Lord Narasimhadev was, if you so please, if you desire that he continues to serve, then please give him good health. So you're right. Good health was secondary. The primary meditation was devotional service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there's no more questions. We'll end over here. Vanchakalpatarubhyaschet kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanande.